Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello and welcome back. Thank you again for tuning in to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Collin Manley, and it is currently August 1st of this recording. Yes, we finally made it to August in this crazy, crazy year that we have going on. Who would have thought that we would actually be getting here? And man, we said that last episode of the week that I recorded, that was for Wednesday, that things were getting off to a crazy start. Well, the crazy literally was just getting started. I mean, I never expected this week to carry on and continue to be the way it was in the world of baseball, but we literally were just getting started, and we got a lot of information. We want to get you up to date on everything going on along with other baseball news today with some of the great topics on the podcast. We're going to be touching upon news and noise around the league. Same thing we like to start things off with. Make sure you're getting your information and everything touched upon when it comes to the 30 teams in Major League Baseball. We once again are going to talk about information on COVID-19 in the league. It just keeps growing, and the season is seeing a lot of changes so far, and we want to make sure that you have all of your information on that going forward. I want to discuss maybe some changes and ideas that we have going forward, just kind of looking at how COVID is going to be changing our season potentially and how we're going to be looking at things. Because let's be real now, more situations with the coronavirus is going to be coming our way. We have not seen the end of it. This is just getting started. So we definitely have a lot of different things that we're going to have to prepare for. And lastly, studs as duds. Yeah, we're going to discuss some of the 10 biggest stars this season who are really having a struggle to start the year off. You know, we expect to see them turn it around at some point. So you fantasy baseball players, I'm sure you can avoid or can't avoid. You want to see that one. You're going to wait for it, and that's going to be in the last segment. But we are definitely going to start things off with news and noise around the league, keeping you up to date on all big information across the 30 teams in Major League Baseball. And the first thing that we really need to talk about, it's a very big story that kind of ties everything together so far that could potentially affect all 30 teams in the MLB. So Major League Baseball has a plan in place to try and get their 60 games in if possible. So the MLB and the MLB Players Association have agreed that double headers can be used to get games in, and the length of those games are going to be changed. So it's not going to be 2 9-inning games moving forward. The plan is it's going to be 2 7-inning games for the rest of the 2020 season. It was put in place to start on August 1st. That is today, Saturday, as of recording. When you're getting this, it's going to be Sunday. So for the rest of the season going forward, doubleheaders, 7-inning games. So if any innings are needed after 7, so let's say that we're going past that 7 inning, we're going to start putting into place the extras rule that we have been seeing so far this season. So that means if we are going to an 8th inning in doubleheaders, we're going to be starting with the previous last out on second base. Another big thing that has to do with games being considered official. If we are having any issues with weather, games will become official after the 5th inning if the home team is winning or 5 complete innings have been played and the away team is leading. So 5 innings, if weather becomes an issue in these doubleheaders, is all it's going to take for it to be an official game. these doubleheaders are going to end up being massive. Now, 7-inning doubleheaders, this is not a crazy rule. It's actually quite common, as it's already being used in college baseball and also minor league baseball, but you'll see it in a lot of other places as well. 7-inning doubleheaders, that is. So it will be the first time this is used at the major league level, 2 7-inning games, since 1912. When the Red Sox and Indians completed the same length of games. So it's definitely going to be new to Major League Baseball, that's for sure. But I don't think it's going to end up being too crazy of a thing. And it's just another rule that we're going to be trying to use to make sure that these games are getting in. They want to reach that 60 mark. So it's going to be weird probably at first just seeing, hey, final in 7. But it's probably a good move in the long run if they're going to try to get all 60 games in for all 30 of the teams. Moving on to now some actual player news. Well, since the loss of Alex Wood for the LA Dodgers, there has been a lack of healthy bodies in that Dodger starting rotation, but it could be changing shortly, and that's at least what is being planned for the Dodgers. It is being reported that Clayton Kershaw is the top option to return and take that roster spot left from Wood. So Kershaw is now currently slated to make his 2020 debut on Sunday. So if you're hearing this, he might have already started pitching or yet. The game hasn't started yet. But Sunday looks like it's going to be his debut versus division foe, the Arizona Diamondbacks. So Kershaw was scratched from his start just 4 hours on opening night from back stiffness. Looks like he's finally going to end up taking the mound when it comes to the Dodgers season. Another change that is being made for the pitching staff for the Dodgers will be that they're going to recall Mitch White from the team's alternate training site. So bringing in one more pitcher as well. Now this will set up White to make his major league debut for the team. So when he's used for the first time, could it be a spot start? Could it be out of the bullpen? We are not really sure. That hasn't kind of been announced yet. But Mitch White, when he makes his appearance on the mound, that's going to be his major league debut for the LA Dodgers. So one more pitcher being added for a team that's desperately been having issues with getting pitchers on the field, especially when it comes to starters, a lot of them not being there, at least from what was expected to be their original starting rotation. Now the Braves, they have decided to make a change in their pitching staff as well, as Atlanta has designated right-hander Jhoulys Chacin for assignment. So in response, the Braves will also select the contract of left-hander Chris Rusin to create space on the roster. So they got rid of Chacin. Rusin's going to be stepping in to take that pitching spot. Now, Chacin was originally signed on a 1-year contract with the Braves. Well, that didn't last too long because that contract started in July. The team had been looking for some depth when it came to the pitching department because Cole Hamels, he had an IL stint early on. Felix Hernandez was going to be on that Braves team when we were expecting. Well, he decided to opt out on the season. So Chacin, who had mostly been a starter in recent years, had 2 appearances out of the bullpen for the Braves. After they saw those 2, they said, hey, we saw enough. We're going to end up moving on from Chacin. He's going to be designated for assignment. So the odds of that is probably he's done in Atlanta, or at least in a Braves uniform. He's really been bouncing around quite a bit recently, maybe looking for another team in the short term. But if there's one thing that's a positive for Chacin, work may come because many teams have been working on pitching health, and it's definitely been a struggle for a lot of these teams. So don't be surprised if he ends up rebounding somewhere. I mean, not that crazy long ago, he was there for the Brewers and Padres having some good showings, some good stints. So this probably won't be the last you see of Chacin, but the next time you see him, most likely it will not be in a Braves uniform. Some other pitcher information: Eduardo Rodriguez is going to be shut down for the rest of the season for the Boston Red Sox. Now, Rodriguez does have a heart ailment that was caused by COVID-19. More specifically, he had an inflammation of the heart. The lefty was expected to be a big time player in the Red Sox rotation. The team loved Rodriguez, really had high hopes for him, but he is going to be shut down since his health conditions have not been improving with his heart. So the good news going along with this, he is expected to make a full recovery for next season, and pitch again for Boston. So there's not a whole lot of concerns with the team moving forward. They have just kind of made the decision that for this season, not worth it. We're not going to take the chance, throw the risk to have him out there. So just for right now, it is smart to make this call with any condition focused around the heart, especially with COVID-19. Heart conditions are just nothing to really mess around with. Probably a good call for the Red Sox to make. I know I was excited to potentially see him pitch this year, but fully understand what the decision is and why they're making this. So Eduardo Rodriguez shut down for the rest of the season for the Red Sox. Well, some other shutdown news as well. The New York Yankees, they got some bad news as Tommy Kahnle's injured elbow looks destined for some Tommy John surgery. An MRI showed a right ulnar collateral injury after Kahnle felt some right forearm tightness in a workout Tuesday night after a game with Baltimore. So big loss for that bullpen for the New York Yankees. Kahnle, he turns 31 on August 7th, so that's coming right around the corner, and he's going to be missed as a big part of that bullpen. Last season, 2019, he had 61 and a third innings pitched with a 3.67 ERA. The righty also averaged 12.9 strikeouts per 9 innings. So he was just great at getting people out. So just a big loss for the Yankee bullpen, especially when they just kind of had the news that it sounded like Aroldis Chapman was going to be coming back. I'm sure they really didn't want to have one arm come in, another one leave, but it looks like that's what's going to end up happening for the Yankees at the back end. So they might be looking to have someone else acquired, signed, what have it. The Yankees are going to be looking to make some sort of move. Trade news, and no shock here, as it involved the Miami Marlins, a team that's going to be talked about a lot going forward. And that Marlins team, they look to get a player in Richard Blyer. He is headed to Miami for a player to be named later. This will be an attempt to fill in the roster that had recently been decimated by positive COVID-19 tests over the week. Blyer, he's coming over from the Baltimore Orioles. He is a 33-year-old left-hander that over his career, his numbers look all right. 2.99 ERA across 177 and a third innings of work with the Yankees and the Orioles since making it to the majors in 2016. So he's only been in the league for this is his fourth season at 33 years old. The career numbers look all right, but the really big red flag is last season was quite a bit of a struggle for the 33-year-old as he had a 5.37 ERA over 55 and a third innings with Baltimore. Also having to remember that Baltimore team wasn't that great last year, so that could be playing a little bit of a factor into it, but he's going to see if he can regain some of his better moments from early in his career, going from Baltimore to Miami. While Miami not a crazy good team, many thought probably coming in the season, definitely having an all right start to their season if they get back to eventually playing some baseball games. That Marlins team, we don't know moving forward. Staying with some Marlins news, we have started to see more opt-outs coming for this season. So, as a side note, just expect to potentially see more of these in the coming days with more information most likely coming out with a lot of concerns over positive tests as of recent with the coronavirus. But Eisen Diaz has informed the Marlins that he plans to opt out for the rest of the 2020 season amid the coronavirus outbreak the team is battling. Now, Diaz is an interesting case because he has been consistently testing negative, at least so far reported. But with this all going on, he has still made the decision to opt out. Now, Diaz did bat 173 as a rookie last season. We get it, not very great, but the organization has really high hopes for the young second baseman and his potential moving forward. So kind of banking on just making a safe, smart call going into next season. Diaz is also kind of a big part of the Marlins because he was a part of the return the team got in the Christian Yelich trade from the Milwaukee Brewers. So they are probably looking out for his future in these uncertain times, and they think he has a chance to do good things. So probably not going to be a lot of complaints from the Marlins that Diaz is sitting out. So just going to be some more roster moves for them if games start happening back up for Miami. Mentioning the Brewers, Lorenzo Cain is another player deciding to opt out on the 2020 season, and this one happens to be a very big blow for the Brewers, as the veteran was having a solid start to the season. So the team had announced the decision on Saturday, and they seem to show full support for the veteran outfielder as he's making some health concerns being the reason why he's making the decision. Cain is a two-time All-Star and a 2019 Gold Glove winner, so winning that last season, which we also might need to talk about that. It's quite unbelievable he only has one Gold Glove to his name, but that's just another discussion for another podcast probably. But so far he had been batting .333 in the season with 2 RBIs in 5 games. Now those numbers don't sound massive with the 2 RBIs, but the bigger picture was he made the move back to being the leadoff hitter for Milwaukee, which is what was happening when he was there. And he originally signed that 5-year contract with the Brewers. Last year kind of struggled at the plate a little bit, was working in the lower part of the lineup. Been very good for Milwaukee when their offense has kind of been a little stagnant this season. Sure, they're sad to see him go, but again, like I said, the team kind of fully supporting his decision. So that's what we have for news and noise so far here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Just a lot of information going around, a lot of uncertainty moving around with kind of pitcher health, seeing some patterns follow here. Also some players starting to opt out. Like we said, something to keep our eyes on in the coming days. It might have a few more players deciding to step away. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to be talking about the COVID-19. What else is there to talk about when it comes to baseball right now? But it's just playing such a massive part. We're going to talk about the crazy outbreak that kind of has come our way, what's going on for multiple teams, really. So making sure you're up to date on all of that here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast, on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Collin Manley. We will be back here after a brief commercial break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Collin Manley. We took the first segment to really talk about some news and noise around the league. We had some big news having to do with doubleheaders for MLB games moving forward. We had some talk about pitcher health. It's going to be a common trend, it seems like, a lot of this season going on. Pitchers being designated for assignment, a lot of things going on there, having to do with a few transaction news, along with some players opting out, which is definitely going to be something that I think we're going to see a lot more moving forward, sadly, but with a lot of uncertainty going on around the league. Opting out is just going to become part of the game, it seems, this season, and it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on, and definitely going to make sure that you are up to date on all of those every time we're releasing podcasts. But the next thing we really want to talk about is where are we with COVID-19 and the crazy outbreak that has come our way. So no surprise here on the last podcast that I released on Wednesday. Last time we talked about it, we were just getting started talking about all the positive tests for the Marlins. Things have changed. How we have grown since then. At this time, the Marlins are currently up to 18 positive player tests as of Friday. So didn't have any Saturday, which is a positive. That's a good thing for the Marlins. But up to Friday, 18 positive tests that were just players. This is going to make a total of 21 members of the Marlins organization that have tested positive. So that's coaches on top of the players as well, getting up to 21. It had gotten to the point that the Marlins, knowing they have this massive amount of positive cases, that they decided to get some buses that were organized to take infected players and coaches home from Philadelphia to Miami, because the team was actually on the road in Philadelphia, and so they decided that they're going to have the most safe travel they possibly can and get these guys on buses to get out of there. That story had come from ESPN, while the rest of the team currently staying put in Philadelphia away from the rest of the team. So all games for the Marlins had been postponed through Sunday. And we have been watching the team making transaction moves, a sign that the team is trying to quickly get a competitive roster potentially put back together for future games. So this has been some free agent signings, some trades, definitely trades being the biggest thing. We even saw the one we talked about in the first segment, Marlins making a trade for a reliever pitcher for a player to be named later, doing whatever they can to try to get things back on track with where they were. So it is certainly being reported that none of the Marlins are showing serious symptoms. A slight positive for the team. Nothing serious coming from Marlins that have tested positive. But it is currently still in question if the team season will continue at home against the Phillies on Tuesday. So that was supposed to be a home game upcoming. As they postponed games through Sunday, they thought Tuesday things are going to come back. They're going to be able to play. Well, right now, that is not necessarily 100% on pace. It gets to be a very complicated issue with the Marlins. If they can't travel back to Miami to play these games, it is possible that the team could stay in Philadelphia, play against the Phillies, and they would just play as the home team, so batting in the later part of the inning. And then from there, the team could move on to New York, where they would have to face the Mets. Following that series with the Mets, if it were to happen, they would go on to Buffalo to face the Blue Jays in their new stadium setup that they're doing at their AAA affiliate. If that were all to happen in that succession, so we're saying that play home game in Philadelphia, travel to New York to see the Mets, travel to Buffalo to play the Blue Jays, it looks like they would not return to Miami until August 14th. So kind of a long quarantine period that we would be seeing. But it gets even more complicated because the Miami-Dade County, where the Marlins play, also requires people to quarantine for 14 days if they are coming from the New York area. So it's complicated to say the least for this team. Really what's going to happen in the upcoming days, we do not know. So the Marlins definitely are going to be a team where they may play games moving forward. They may not. Their roster could be very, very, very different. We aren't sure going forward. It's definitely going to be something to watch. So the Marlins aren't the only one that are getting in on all the positive tests, because not to mention those Cardinals. They have decided to get in on the outbreak front with positive tests coming out. After a postponed matchup between the Brewers and the Cardinals on Friday, rapid tests, R-A-P-I-D, not rabid, rapid tests were brought in. It was reported that 4 to 6 additional Cardinals, and not all players at this moment, had tested positive. So this led to the postponement of Saturday's game in Milwaukee as well, and what most likely puts into question any games on Sunday as well. They were talking about doubleheaders, but as of right now, most likely leading towards postponement. There was also talks about how some Cardinals coaches had been in the Miller Park facilities, but there was no direct contact with anybody on Brewer staff, so they are not really worried about any Brewer staff or players contracting the virus as well. One of the other positives was expected. The Cardinals did do some contact tracing. So one of their positives was expected. They thought for sure one of their players was going to test positive just from tracing back to other positive tests. The thing that ended up surprising them is having more than one positive, but that's kind of just the virus. It's an unknown here. This was reported by Jeff Passan of ESPN. The team is really hoping that the spread is contained at this moment because they were able to do this contact tracing, but more information is going to come back when more of these saliva tests that the league has been doing are completed. So we're going to have to see where this goes as they are testing more players and staff on the Cardinals. This one will have more information coming. The Cardinals are now another team many will have their eyes going on forward. So if it's really as contained as they hope, things can go on forward out of this weekend as planned. If not, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens with the team moving forward. The other team that's been very heavily affected by this is the Philadelphia Phillies, the team that last played the Miami Marlins before all the positive tests came out. They, as of right now, hope to be in a good position after a full week since the games versus the Marlins. So getting a week away from any type of contact that could have happened. The team has reported 0 positive tests on players since postponing games. So since they have been playing against the Marlins, not a single player has tested positive. The league has said to have a lot of optimism about some tests that did test positives in the Phillies organization. So a coach and a clubhouse attendant were reported to have tested positive, but they think that they were potentially false positives, so that the tests were off. So the Phillies have been back working out in their stadium, in their facilities, because all the players have gotten the thumbs up, and they are hoping to get games going again. They are still scheduled to play this week as of right now. The Yankees, they're splitting a 2-2 home and away series. They're going to play Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. 2 games in Philadelphia, 2 games in New York. As of right now, those games are planned, good to go. So that's a very positive sign moving forward that the third team we kind of had our eye on looks to be okay. Now, the biggest and most concerning noise definitely has to be coming from the players potentially having issues with being strict on their own and avoiding this virus. Now, a lot of this stuff is rumors that are floating around, but there definitely seems to be some trends with a lot of people very upset with the information going out and about. So you're wondering how realistic some of this is and having to do with a lot of these positive tests. But there were rumors circulating that Marlins players were going out to clubs before the major spread within their own team. And now there are some stories coming out about Cardinals players being at a casino recently spreads concerns on the seasons. There was even talk about some of these players being out on golf courses in the Milwaukee area. That one I haven't heard as much about, but definitely was talks of players being at the casinos. So players not following protocols at the moment is kind of what is ruining this thing, as a lot of people are believing, for 28 other teams and fans as well that have been following these protocols pretty well. And now I get it. I do want to talk about this as a real person, not just someone who's covering baseball. It is very hard to tell these guys how to live their lives, as many are doing what they want in the real world. I'm going to be a realist. You see a lot of people out and about in the season, and there's just a lot of concerns that are going on. But if they want to continue this season, they need to tighten it up. There really is no excuse. The players went and fought for money in this offseason, or before the season was really starting to get going. That was a major concern on whether or not these guys wanted to play, risking at all. I remember very vividly following this. Money was the concern. And when the Players Association and the MLB came to an agreement, and now we have guys putting the season in jeopardy because they're being careless in what they're doing with their off time. And again, I get it. They want to go off. They want to do things. They want to do things that are fun. But it's just not the world we want to live in or can live in really at this moment. The world we want to live in, yes, we want to be doing this stuff, but we can't be doing this just because we know the risks are out there, and these players can't be careless because of how easy it is to get this virus and pass it on to other people. And now we have guys putting this season in jeopardy. It doesn't sound fun and luxurious. I know. If your life is just the baseball season, you're going from park to home, park to home, park to home. I get it. It doesn't sound like it's the greatest thing in the world, but this is your job that you agreed upon. You came into an agreement. Players Association voted on this, and they went forward to it. If you want this season to happen, it's baseball and home for many of these guys. And especially for these guys that have families that they're concerned about. It's definitely a big point. It's a big talking point. Family health. Thinking about your teammates. Thinking about the issues with their living situations. How many of these players have cited, young newborns that they're very worried about? You got to look at your teammates and go, okay, I got to make a safe decision, not just for me, but for the other guys on this team. It is time for these players to be responsible and better because they don't have the bubble format like other sports. Like now is the time to get serious about this. They don't have that bubble format. And we'll talk more about that in upcoming segments, but your life has to become that format. You may not be living it right now, but that's what your life has to be if we're going to get this thing going moving forward. Isolate yourself from the risk. Be responsible for this league to keep going. That's what a lot of these players, it's a hard realization, but they have to come to this realization. So Commissioner Rob Manfred, he remains pretty confident that the season can continue and it's going to go on, but he has even said how the players just need to be better. It's a big talking point right now. It has been talked about how Manfred told the Players Association Executive Director Tony Clark that if the sport doesn't do a better job of managing, it could be shut down for the entire season. It feels like it could be coming if things don't change or get better. We are really treading water in this situation. We don't know fully what the future holds, but teams are going to have to become more strict if they want to see this thing through. It's going to be hard for some of these teams. You really are going to have to clamp down when it comes to everything we've seen so far. But when it comes to rescheduling, just kind of talking through this again, some of the things we've touched on, make sure we have this all down. The Yankees and Phillies, they're going to play 4-game series, home and home series from Monday through Thursday. In New York, Monday and Tuesday. In Philadelphia on Wednesday and Thursday. That's the plan for those two teams that have been seeing some postponements. Originally scheduled game between the Yankees and the Tampa Bay Rays in Tampa Bay on Thursday is being rescheduled as part of a doubleheader for next Saturday. So that's going to be a time where we're going to see these 7-inning games into effect for next week for the Rays and the Yankees. The remainder of their 4-game series on Friday and Saturday and Sunday will remain as scheduled. So 1 game Friday, 1 game Sunday, doubleheader Saturday for the Yankees and Rays next week. The originally scheduled games between the Phillies and the Marlins from this past week that did not happen, as well as the originally scheduled games for the Yankees and the Orioles, because they had some postponements as well, they are going to be rescheduled to a later date. We do not have those currently as we are talking on this recording. So that's going to be something to keep our eye on moving forward. Should another outbreak materialize, Manfred, who has the power to shut down this season, could move in that direction. He has made the threat. I don't even know if you want to call it a threat. It's just he's telling the realization to the Players Association that the season could be shut down if we are not controlling these outbreaks. Multiple players briefed on a Friday's call with Manfred feared the season could have been could have been shut down as soon as Monday if positive tests jumped or if players continue to just not abide by the league's protocol. So that was sources told to ESPN as well that if tests jump like mad or if we're seeing players having issues with this, then shutdown could be coming. But hopefully things are a little more under control, as we talked about how the Cardinals believe, at least as of right now, they have things kind of locked down. In addition, networks that are broadcasting MLB games have been alerted and told to look at possible alternate programming after this weekend. So they're trying to get people prepared that if a shutdown is coming, TV is prepared. And this was a story that came from Keith Olbermann. So nobody wants to have it happen. Like we mentioned before, Manfred is confident that it won't, but they're preparing people for the worst. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Further, it's just kind of concern about off-the-field choices. One high-ranking official was saying that there are bad decisions that are being made by players when they are away from the field, away from the team, away from the game. And so it's something that's going to be watched on. I really am hoping that teams clamp down on this, whether it be punishments, something. They want this season going on. Many of these players want it. Just, you don't want a few bad apples to ruin it for the whole batch here. And it's something that's frustrating as a fan. And I'm sure a lot of people share in that frustration in which we see these guys finally get a season to happen in some very troubling times where it's hard to have a season. That's something to also be realistic about too. But if we were going to take the risk to try this out, everyone has to buy in. Everyone has to buy in. And so this season is very much on watch, treading water. It's going to be the popular phrase moving forward. And I'm definitely interested to see what news keeps coming out, but I'm hopefully looking to getting some positive news. That's what I really want to start seeing. So that's going to be it for this segment. And it's a bummer of one, that's for sure. I'm being realistic with all the listeners. So hopeful, fingers crossed, knock on wood, whatever we need. Make sure that these players realize that they play a big part with their off-the-field decisions. Coming in the next segment, we're going to talk about what could we expect to see. This season has a bunch of questions with the recent COVID things that are happening, looming around. Going forward, what are some things that could happen? What could be altered in this season? Just kind of a lot of questions that I still have, and I want to make sure that I take the time to talk about that and get some information out to you guys and maybe even some ideas that could potentially change the way this season happens. More change could be good. So you're listening here to the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Collin Manley. We will be right back after a quick commercial break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Collin Manley. We just got done talking about everything that's been happening in the league with COVID, coming from the commissioner, having to do with our three teams, the Marlins, who were hit very heavy, the Phillies, who kind of had to take the fallback of everything going on with Miami, and then the Cardinals being another team that we've seen some recent positive tests and cancellations of games. Well, not cancellations, but postponements, because the league is still hoping to get those games in, hoping that they still happen. A lot of questions, trying to get as much information out that we have right now. And it made me want to lead into talking about, so what can we expect to see? This season really has a bunch of questions looming around it going forward, just because there's a lot of uncertainty. So we know that there's protocols that the league have created to try to prepare themselves for getting these games in, prepare themselves for when teams have outbreaks, just trying to be ready for everything that could possibly have come their way. What will we do with teams moving forward? Because we expect, at least I do, more teams to have potential outbursts between them. I don't think this is going to be the last we're going to hear about little flare-ups with teams. It's not going to be the last postponements. We are going to see more of this. I think it's inevitable. But the size of this may result in many different responses. So teams that control this well, which is what we're hoping with the Cardinals. This is going to be a great example of this. With small amounts of positive tests, may be able to get away with just roster moves and continue seasons with minor delays. So, yeah, we see this one series with the Brewers being completely postponed. None of the games happening. Well, these games could be rescheduled for a later date. We could be playing some doubleheaders. Since it's Cardinals-Brewers and they're in the same division, they're definitely going to see each other quite a few more times. There's potential to fit those games in. This is really the best-case scenario. This is where the doubleheaders come to be of value. If quick tests come back with very promising results, the MLB and these teams will try to squeeze in the games, at least as many as they possibly can. If the Cardinals are going to work out like they're hoping, in the sense that, hey, we got this under control, it's only one player, it's a couple other people in our organization, we'll quarantine them, they'll be away, we'll bring off someone off our emergency squad, we'll be good to go moving forward. That is going to be great. This is best case scenario moving forward, hoping that the Marlins and the Cardinals are the worst of what we see and that it all gets better. With the Marlins, probably, at least it feels right now, is the worst. Their whole roster is just decimated from this, but the Cardinals are just going to be one to keep our eye on. The big question that is coming up in my mind, though, as these postponements are happening, is how are we going to look at these teams if the game totals aren't the same at the end of the season? So playoffs get very easy in normal circumstances because when it comes down to it, everyone plays 162 games. Most cases, different records, we know we go forward with that. Sometimes if they have the same record, which is rare, but it happens, we go on head-to-head matchups or we'll go into a playoff scenario. Easy enough. But I'm more looking at it as what happens in the scenario if one team ends the season with 60 games played and another team ends the game with 52. What if we have that major difference? Is it possible with the postponements and games being tough to get in and squeeze, what can be done if we don't get all these games in? We may just have to accept it. It's a crazy season. Weird things are already happening. We're trying out new rules all over the place. We might just have to go postseasons here. Sorry, we don't have the same amount of games. It's going to have to make us change our focus to most likely, my best guess, my best idea for this would be winning percentages for teams moving into the postseason. Now, if it's considerably close, very close, like especially two teams in the same division, let's say that the Brewers-Cardinals, since this is one that's just happening, the Cardinals don't end up getting some of these games in against another team because they have more positive tests, and the Brewers have a worse winning percentage but more games, well, then maybe we need to go head-to-head with those ones. But let's say that we're looking at a team from the NL Central compared to the NL East. We really don't have any matchup. We won't see them play each other. So we have to come up with an idea when it comes to this seeding that we're talking about. We already have 16 teams making the playoffs. That is the big change and shift in this season. Well, if they're not playing each other, we're not going to have like opponents. All we have is winning percentage to go off of this. And I think it gets to be a very much of a gray area and very shady if we just punish one team because they had the outbreaks and the other team didn't. So we say, well, this team played 61, so they get the better seed. Or this team played 60, and they get the better seed. Well, this one played 52. You can't go that route. You got to have a plan for this just in case if it doesn't happen. winning percentage is probably going to be the way that they're going to go. It's going to burn for fans, for sure. For sure. I know that if it was me, I would hate it. But you really don't have a better option. At least I feel of right now. Maybe you'll think about this, come back with something better. Maybe MLB will come up with something. But that's the way it's looking. And now the shift is not going to be a major change in what would end up in playoff teams making it anyway. At least I believe. It isn't impossible. It's just kind of the best we got. It will not, hopefully, be the difference between, say, 3 teams not making the postseason just because of another team not playing all the games. Now, it's something we'll understand better when we get there, but if we get there, it's just the idea. So head-to-head play will come into play, as well as looking at teams in the same division. Other ways, we got to come up with an idea. It will come to be a part of that record. We'll have to maybe play a playoff game if it gets too tight. Maybe we can get a one-on-one game right as we go into the playoffs to settle who gets the 3, who gets the 4. It's definitely possible, but with the time crunch, trying to get this in as quick as the MLB wants to, maybe it's not possible. So definitely something I'm going to keep my eye on going forward. So the Marlins are another good example of this because they are already going to have a lot of ground to make up. But with the time crunch, they just might not have the chance to fit it all in. And if another team comes to this, we're just going to have to accept the alternate way that the outcome happens. Now, it's just treading water. I can understand a team also saying, but hey, this messes with our home field advantage. It's not fair that their winning percentage is higher playing less games, and now maybe we have to play them in the next round because of this. I agree. The less travel is still a big thing to play for in these playoff games, especially in the first round. That team's going to be hosting the better seed's going to be hosting all the games. I understand. I get it. The argument, and only argument really to come back for this, though, is to say home field isn't as valuable this season as past seasons with no fans in the stadiums. So at least going forward with that, yeah, we get it. We have to travel to play you instead of having the home game. But remember, there's no fans. That's not going to be affecting anything. So that's just one thing that I've been thinking about, wanting to see. I would love for the MLB to kind of come out and state this right away, just in case if it happens. I know they got a lot on their plate, a lot of things that they don't know is coming, but I think it would be great for them to just come out and let the teams know ahead of time, hey, if we don't get these games in, which it's possible, this is how we would settle playoff seeding. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I know I'm asking for a big one there. Another thing, and this has been a conversation I've been having with more people because it's a prevalent conversation, and I need to touch on it again, is why didn't we just do a bubble? And is it too late for this league to do a bubble? And we really talked about this before, and a bubble didn't happen in the past. It just wasn't realistic for baseball, for a baseball season at the beginning. The bubble talk, it happened, but the ability of a bubble with the MLB never really seemed possible compared to these other sporting leagues. NBA and NHL, they're having a great deal of success. Positive tests are down. They're not happening in these bubbles. I get it. But they don't have as big of a hurdle as the MLB has. We have to remember that those two leagues are finishing a brief regular season or play-in games and then going right into the playoffs. Well, the MLB had to figure out a way to get what's considered an entire season, in air quotes, on top of a postseason. So it just was not the same considering what you were looking at. Players and staff had little to no interest in this going to isolation for a major amount of time, and so when the discussion was being made between the Players Association and the MLB, it was a moot point. It was not there. It was not going to happen. But now with all the tests coming through and postponements coming through, can these teams shorten it even more and potentially create bubbles? So we have teams from the NL playing AL, and they're having that crossover, but I am wondering if divisions can focus around a certain collection of cities and a chance to just limit the player travel bubble things the best they can, and maybe let's just see AL East teams playing just AL East teams. Can we get rid of the crossover games, and could we bubble this? The short answer is it's possible, but it's really tricky this late in. So the spring training facilities are an obvious opening thought. Because if you're playing with just your division, you got 5 teams, more often than not, you're going to have 2 games in a day, minimum, and 1 team resting. So 4 teams playing, 1 team resting each day. I'm guessing that would be the way if they have to shrink this thing down even more. Could we take advantage of those training facilities for spring training? That's possible. But we just can't send everybody there, okay? We can't just send everyone to Florida, everyone to Arizona, and try to get this in. We might have to try to locate these things in some towns that are also not that far apart. One idea that comes to me is, can we focus some teams around the Chicago and Milwaukee area? That's 3 stadiums right there for teams to use. Could we have the NL Central and AL Central potentially in the same area, even if they're not playing each other, and use the White Sox, Cubs, and Brewers stadiums that are all relatively close? It just gets to a point of, if we're going to try to bubble something, you got to really, really be closely located. That's why the Orlando thing is great for the NBA. I mean, they only need a couple courts. They're right there. They have all the hotels. Baseball situations, having big diamonds by each other with all the hotels and everything, gets to be a little tricky, especially when you consider how big these stadiums are. Also, another problem is when these games will be played, if we share these stadiums, the stadium most likely would be used for at least 2 games in a day. So how's this cleanup process going to go? How are we going to get players in a locker room, in game, out after the game, get this place cleaned up, ready, locker room, bullpen, dugout, everything sanitized down, and then get ready for more teams to come in, and then just keep reversing this cycle? Is it possible? Yeah, it's possible, but it's going to be problematic, especially considering times and just the potential of all of this happening. That's one hurdle we would have to clear. Another big hurdle is going to have to be these TV deals. This was a big part of MLB's problem as well. They wanted to make sure they're getting their money from TV deals. These games are getting aired. This will make things complicated if one team is not playing any games in what was considered their original home stadium. So the bubble, yes, is it possible? But now we're going to have to figure out that logistic. There's a reason that this didn't happen right away. There's a lot of hurdles. And the NBA, they had to figure a lot of these things out. The NHL had to figure a lot of these things out. Can it be done? Yes. But if they end up moving in that direction, there is a lot of stuff that's going to have to be figured out. If there's just one thing I want to focus on going forward, and I want to see it the most, and I touched upon it briefly before, I just want these teams to put the clamps down. This virus is unpredictable in many ways. I, along with many others, know there is no perfect plan to go against this thing. Yes, you can tell me what other leagues are doing. I'm glad it's working. That's awesome and amazing. But going into it, we didn't know what was going to be best. And with that said, careless players, or heck, any other people in the organization, for that matter, that are careless, can be what shuts this thing all down. With some of these early issues, I wonder how serious some players may have taken this at the start. Because if any of these rumors are true about players outside of the ballpark, it is very, very sad, because these players were given a choice. The opt-out is being used, but most of the players that we are seeing use this opt-out is because of health concerns, and that is very important. I will never knock a player for opting out of this thing because of health. But if you are also a player that can't handle these conditions that they are putting you in for this season, you may need to consider this opt-out as well. And it seems mean, it seems harsh, but it's just the reality. You want that full game pay. You fought for as much money as you could possibly get for this season. You want this season to happen. You want this to succeed, to limit issues for future seasons. These are questions you have to ask yourself as a player. Then it is time for you to buy in and do the little things that you can do to make sure the season is not canceled. Because if you wanted to head to the casino on the off day, you know what? That's a decision you made. But that's a decision you're making to ruin the season for many others. And if you can't handle it because on your off day you want to go to a casino, you want to go to a bar, you want to go to a club, opt out. If you can't handle it, opt out. It is difficult, for sure. I understand. But if I was in their shoes, you have so much to play for this year. Is it the smartest thing to be playing? It might not be. But the games are happening. The league is trying to put something together to keep it safe so that this can happen. A small bad decision could have a ripple effect unlike one you could have ever imagined. Teams, players, coaches, whatever your involvement is in the organization, tighten it up and let's make this happen going forward. Gonna leave it at that. So that's what we have for segment 3 here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Collin Manley. We're going to get away from the COVID talk a little bit. I know it's harsh. It's hard. I don't want to talk about it as much. I really don't. It's a big part of the league. And so it definitely needs to be talked about. So we're going to be diving into studs that have kind of been duds this season. And I'm going to give my guys that I think, hey, they're going to turn the season around. Don't worry about what you've seen so far. They're going to get there. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to get into that here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. We just got done talking about some more questions, some thoughts about what to expect moving forward with everything happening with COVID-19 in baseball. The season's at a question point. We just don't know what to expect. We're really hoping that we're kind of seeing the worst of it and teams are getting past it and they're kind of getting things controlled as the season moves forward. But it's just a lot more information is going to be coming out as we move forward. We wanted to step away from that because we want to actually take this time to start talking about things that are actually happening in the season and what's going on for some of our stars in MLB. Because when it comes down to it this season, we've had a lot of stars that aren't playing very much like stars. So it's time for us to really break down some studs who have been duds, at least this far to start this season. We know that with the pressure of squeezing in a season, it would lead to some struggles in players. We always have players that get off to slow starts in a season. That really is nothing new at all. But we have a large group of top-end players that are coming out cold to start our 2020 season. And I wanted to take the time to look at 10 players that we expect to see turn this around. And now something that I want to throw out on the front end, want to make sure this is known for everyone coming forward. I avoided pitchers at this first look. If we come back to this later in the season, guys that we think could turn it around, we'll throw in pitchers then. But as of right now, there is no pitchers in this example. I mainly didn't want to touch that because I didn't want to talk about how most starters at this point, they really only have one game under their belt or 2 games maximum. So it wouldn't be fair to just start breaking these guys down in such a short sample. And then, when I started thinking about relievers, top-end closers as well, they really just don't have many innings under their belt. It's hard to completely label a season as a dud with such little chance at this opportunity, along with relievers just having short work to begin with. So the lead for innings at this point is 14 innings pitched, and that's by Shane Bieber, who's got 2 starts, been the best pitcher in baseball probably so far, but that's just such a small sample. So we really have to come back to this one at a future time, along with some other caveats that we have looking forward. So the first one, stud, that's kind of been a dud, and this probably is just the perfect way to explain his season so far. It has to be Christian Yelich. I mean, he's got a .037 batting average on the season. 27 at-bats, only 1 hit to his name, an RBI, 12 strikeouts. He is just struggling to make contact so far this season, let alone it would be such a different story if he was just hitting the ball hard at people. It just seems those screaming line drives that were always coming off his bat just have not been there for Yelich. And it's so crazy to think, considering the last 2 years, and especially last season, he got off to one of the craziest hot starts of his career, and that season just exploded for him. This year, not so much. Now, one thing that we've noticed with him, they started the season, the Brewers, against the Cubs, and Wrigley Field, in his entire career, even when he was with the Marlins, just does not hit well in Wrigley. So that doesn't help him to begin with. But 6 games in for Christian Yelich, the numbers are just scary bad. Scary bad, scary low. And somehow the Brewers are winning without it. It's not really slowing them down as they've started the season off doing okay. I mean, 3-3, second in the NL Central, not putting up a ton of runs in games. Really need Yelich to get things going because he was that staple coming back that the Brewers really hoped was going to keep their offense rolling, even with a revolving door of some players. So Christian Yelich, definitely, he's a guy you don't think is going to stay down. That swing is just too pretty. He's got such a track record over the last 2 years of being so good. It's hard to believe that he's going to have such a low, bad season. Number 2, another guy last year got off to a hot, crazy start, did very great things for the LA Dodgers, would be Cody Bellinger. Now, the 25-year-old, he's hitting .139 to start the season. He's got 8 games played, 5 hits, and 36 at-bats. 1 extra base hit, only 2 RBIs to his name. Bellinger did make some changes to his swing. Something very interesting to notice when you're watching him play. Those changes really aren't seeming to help him out so far. The former MVP, he's definitely looking to get some things fixed up. How is it affecting his team, though? Well, not really at all. This is a loaded Dodgers team. They are sitting the season currently at 5-3, second in their NL West, but they are just a team with so much talent. Even with Bellinger slumping the way he is, not really slowing him down. More of the concerns for the Dodgers are being on the pitching side and just having guys healthy. But Bellinger is another stud we can pretty much expect, at least I think, he's going to turn things around going forward in the rest of the season. I mean, that's just 2 big names. And the big names are just going to get bigger as we look at all of these teams that are having players struggle, the next one, number 3, stud that's been a dud, is Ronald Acuna Jr. Now, Acuna Jr. was someone I think a lot of people were expecting to just take off this season. He's batting 152 so far in the year. 33 at-bats, only 5 hits, 2 extra base hits, 2 doubles to his name, no home runs, no RBIs this season. Usually batting leadoff, understood, but still nothing there. Only 3 walks, 17 strikeouts. So striking out half the time. Struggling at the plate. And an interesting stat that ended up coming across my way. Well, Ronald Acuna at Friday had 15 strikeouts on the season. 17 now total. That's more than Tony Gwynn had in 1995 when he hit 368. So got your shout out to Tony Gwynn, who was just amazing with the bat. But just kind of the way baseball is now, strikeouts are just happening. And Acuna, he's striking out quite a bit for the Atlanta Braves to start their season. And he's a guy they definitely want to see turn around because they've had some issues with guys deciding to sit out the season. Health, their outfield needs the help as they are 5-3, second in the NL East right now. Luckily, they're getting some other contributions from guys like Dansby Swanson, who's having a good start to his season, which I'm sure that the Braves have been hoping and praying to see. Number 4 for studs and duds, and I'm going to cheat this one a little bit. I'm going to cheat. You can call me out on it, but I'm going to say Juan Soto right now, and it's just because the guy hasn't flat out played. We haven't seen him on the field, and it's something that's hurting this Nationals team. They need to have him back. Just going to get cleared to play. Rumors are saying that he's coming back because he's been feeling fine, but we need to see Soto get out on the field because this Nationals team needs a bump to their offense. They're 3-4 on the season. They have the pitching. They need the bat. So, again, I said this one's a cheat. This is a stud. He might come out right away and show the stud that he is. And I'd love to see it because this is the guy that became one of my favorite players to watch when it comes to the Washington Nationals because of last year's postseason. Not going to dive into him too much because, like I said, he hasn't played yet. The next one, stud who's been kind of a dud, JT Realmuto. Now, this is a big season for JT because he's looking to cash in on a big-time contract. He has his eyes on what Yasmani Grandal made in the free agent market. He has his eyes on what Buster Posey has as a contract right now. He has the opportunity to get paid. And while it may fluctuate a little bit just because of how, the COVID numbers may bring salary down and everything, he is struggling through his 3 games that he has played so far this season. Now, the Phillies being shut down, getting to play a full stretch like everyone else. Well, in his 3 games, 13 at-bats, only 2 hits right now. One of them being a home run, 4 strikeouts as well. He's someone that's going to be a big part of this team moving forward, especially considering the fact that the Phillies need to have a bounce-back season. I mean, they spent a little bit of money. Only 1-2 in the season again, only 3 games in. But they spent some money getting Didi Gregorius this offseason. Had a good start to him. They spent money to get Bryce Harper. They made the trade for Realmuto, the trade for Gene Segura. They spent money on pitching. I mean, there is just a lot in this team as they added Zach Wheeler and paid for Arrieta before. They want to get things going. So Realmuto, only 3 games in, needs to get his season rolling when the Phillies hopefully get to start games back up on Monday. Number 6, Mr. Chris Bryant. He is another big name because contract buzz around with him a lot on the season. And there's also been a lot of talks of just trade chatter around him potentially being moved on this team. He's batting with a 120 average so far this year. In his 6 games played, he's got 25 at-bats, 3 hits, only 1 extra base hit, 1 double, 2 RBIs, 3 walks, but 10 strikeouts as well. Got to watch him early in that Brewers series where him and Yelich both struggling out of the gates to make just some solid contact on some pitches, it feels like. Could be a name that gets traded and a team that looks into potentially even paying him. Well, if he doesn't turn around what's going on for him right now, the odds of that happening are getting lower and lower for Mr. Chris Bryant. So he's someone with a lot on the line this season. If he doesn't stay in Chicago, that's fine. But you got to show that you are worth a great trade potentially for you this season. Number 7, this one hurts me. This one just flat out hurts me because of the fact that I want him to have such a great season in Shohei Ohtani. Batting-wise, things are turning around a little bit. He got off to a slow start. 148 on the season, 2 home runs, 7 RBIs. He's getting there. Things are getting better for Ohtani at the plate. But the thing that concerns me as well, and even though I know I'm not diving pitchers in fully, his first outing on the mound, he got absolutely rocked. Absolutely rocked. And I didn't expect that. Can say for myself, was shocked. Because that game was ugly, ugly, ugly to see. So, I mean, he started one game, 3 walks, 3 hits, 5 runs. He didn't even get through an inning pitch. Need to see him turning around things offensively, keep going, but on the mound, getting things figured out. This guy could be the most exciting player in baseball. He really could be. I'm hoping he gets there. I'm believing he's going to get there. He's just too much stud to be playing like a dud, that's for sure. Next up is almost another one that's a little bit of cheating, but I don't think it's too much cheating, is Anthony Rendon. He was battling an injury early on. Wasn't able to get out in the field right away. Understood. But Rendon now has 4 games under his belt, and as a guy that cashed in this offseason because he had a great 2019 season with the Nationals, well, through those 4 games, 2 hits and 12 at-bats, 1 home run, 7 walks is the one thing that's been going for him. Discipline at the plate, been great with that. Only 3 strikeouts. The guy has a good stick, just struggling to put something really great in play. This A's team could have one of the greatest trios of star talents, of studs. Well, we might not see a lot of Trout for a little bit because of the child being born. Ohtani's turning things around. Rendon's starting to get a lot more action. We need to see those guys elevate their game. Otherwise, this is going to be a tough season for the Angels after they just spent a lot of money to try to get better. Number 9 for our stud, playing like a dud, who we think is going to turn things around. We're going to go on that Houston Astros tour. They've been having a tough time. A lot of things going on with the Astros and getting some pitches thrown at them and suspensions that might seem a little unfair considering the fact that, a team flat out cheated and admitted to it. I'm not bitter or anything. Bregman is not having a great start to the season. Got 7 games played so far for the third baseman. 28 at-bats, 5 hits, only 3 extra base hits. 3 of his 5, so good for him there. 5 RBIs, only 5 walks. Discipline in the sense of strikeouts. Only 6 strikeouts on the year. Not getting many hits right now. The offense for the Astros, that is their thing. They did lose a pitcher in Garrett Cole. Verlander, he's got some injuries. We don't know how long he's going to be out. Could be out the whole season. We're not quite sure. That thing is really up in the air right now. Zach Greinke kind of being their only guy. Well, big time for the Astros offense to show up. But one player in Bregman is kind of having a slow start. You just came off 2 big losses to the Dodgers as well. Only 4-3 on the year. That AL West is going to be more competitive with Oakland there than you think. that A's team is going to give them fits. Hard to waste games early on for the Houston Astros. So Bregman, one other person that needs to turn it around. And our 10th and our last one, stud, playing a little bit like a dud to start the year. We think he's going to get going. One more Astro and Jose Altuve. 148 average so far in the season. 7 games played, 27 at-bats, 4 hits. Of those 4 hits, 2 extra base hits, 5 RBIs, 6 walks, 8 strikeouts. Again, the numbers don't scream scary when you look at he's getting walks, strikeouts aren't overly awful, but the guy's just not getting hits right now. On base isn't that crazy high. A lot of the same things we said about Bregman. The offense really needs to carry, and there's a lot of guys on that offense for Houston that are struggling right now. They have a few guys that are batting well, but in their starting lineup, 120, 148, 179, 200 batting average. Got to get those things up to kind of combat against the pitching woes that potentially could be coming for the Astros. So those are our 10 guys that we have. Studs playing as duds so far. Going to hopefully turn things around. A lot of guys that I would be confident in, betting in. If you are someone that has these guys in a fantasy league, I would not be selling low. Would not be selling low on Christian Yelich, Cody Bellinger, Ronald Acuna, Juan Soto, Real Muto, Chris Bryant, Ohtani, Rendon, Bregman, Altuve. Those 10 guys. But you're probably sweating a little bit, hoping that they're playing and getting those numbers up. At least I know I would be. That's fantasy baseball. It stresses me out way too much. I play fantasy in other sports, but baseball it stresses me out, so I can't get to it too much. So that's going to be it for our last segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I want to thank you again for listening to the Baseball Podcast. It's brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice review. That really helps us out. That's great when we see reviews. It helps us know how we can make the show better, what you guys are looking forward to, what you want to hear about. Even if you have questions to send our way, that'd be awesome. We could talk about that stuff on the show. So it would really help us out a lot. If you want, you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter. A lot of other shows have Instagram. We're most active on Twitter when it comes to the baseball Instagram baseball podcast, most active on Twitter. We've got a lot of great stuff on there. Really following the games, giving some thoughts in there as the week goes on and well. So want to thank you again for listening. Hoping you had a great weekend. Hoping that baseball turns things around and we have a lot of positive things going forward because we know I don't want to lose this season. So thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm Collin Manley signing off.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.